Welcome in to the Rock Talk Studio, the place to find your next great rock and roll book or documentary. This is the podcast that reviews, previews, and most importantly, recommends to you the good stuff. Like today's book, a story I've been waiting to read for over 40 years. That is a lot of expectation to live up to. Did it? Did it live up to that ton of personal expectation? I'm going to let you know. I'm your host, Big Rick. Join me for an exclusive look into what's hitting the shelves and the screens, and get ready to rock your reading and viewing list. And today, the spotlight falls on Peter Wolf's memoir, Waiting on the Moon, Artists, Poets, Drifters, Grifters, and Goddesses. And I'm going to start the review off with a quote from Bob Dylan. He recently published an endorsement of this book. Yes, Bob Dylan came out and sent an endorsement of Peter Wolf's book, and so did Springsteen, Bonnie Raitt, Elvis Costello, and Little Steven, to name a few. Not a bad bunch of people heaping praise on this book. So here's the Dylan quote. The quote was a lot longer, but I'm just going to use the first sentence. This book reads like a fast train, and you'll get a glimpse of everyone passing by through the windows. I couldn't have said it better, Bob. It's right on. Waiting on the Moon is an unorthodox collection of vignettes about Wolf's incredible journey through music, art, and relationships. You get taken on a 60-plus year journey of a bohemian lifestyle that is packed with music and cultural history. This book is quick, it's thrilling, it's funny, and it's filled with the distinct faces and voices of the artists, musicians, and iconic figures who played key roles through Peter Wolf's life. Wolf grew up in a tiny 3-room apartment in the Bronx, New York. He was raised by his bohemian intellectual mother and his father, a former vaudeville singer who had a tremendous influence on both his love of music and painting. Like his persona, these stories are wild. It's hard to believe they're actually true. He gets himself into some crazy predicaments and situations that are made even crazier from the list of characters he mixes it up with. And with the way Wolf tells the story, with his Bronx attitude and swagger, but also with a mix of humor and humility and nostalgia, you really get an intimate portrait of the people who shaped him. Alfred Hithcock invited him over his house because he wanted him to do a soundtrack for one of his last films. Muddy Waters used to sleep on his couch in the early days of Muddy's career. His father once dropped him off at an art teacher's house when Wolf was young, and it turned out to be Norman Rockwell. He was married to Faye Dunaway. David Lynch was his roommate at Boston College. There are also stories about his times with Eleanor Roosevelt, Mick Jagger, Bob Dylan, Marilyn Monroe, Julia Child, Waylon Jennings, Aretha Franklin, and Tennessee Williams, to name a few. It goes on and on. This list is just a partial list of who he talks about in this book. It's wild. And what's really cool is you get to see a glimpse of all these people through Peter's lens, and he's very open and inquisitive to all the different lifestyles and encounters, and you really get a sense of what these people are like beyond what most people have already thought about them. This is not a linear telling of his life. It's not that kind of a book. This book is made up of 35 chapters, and each chapter reads as its own short story, and it's told with gentle humor and deep emotion. I like how he was able to weave together contrasting moments from his life into something cohesive and meaningful. It's rich, and it's a nostalgic trip through time that highlights his musical influences and friendships that he forged along the way. Peter Wolf has an extremely colorful personality, and you get a chance to witness the exploration of not only these times with all these incredible people, but also Wolf's creative process and the personal struggles that came with fame. The book is a real testament to how Wolf was regarded by people of all walks of life. He was and is a champion of early blues and soul and R&B and rock and roll. And throughout his career, he makes sure to really speak and treat artists with such high regard that it's no wonder people just seem to be drawn to him. His thirst for music and culture and art history never seemed to wane. And it really shows up in this book. And it always placed him next to people of incredible creativity. He has a profound passion for all types of art and the people who make it, especially music. Most people know Peter Wolf as the lead singer of the J.Geils Band, if they know of him at all, which is kind of a shame. This book lays out, without putting himself on any kind of pedestal, what a lot of people have been missing about this incredible guy. He's actually a little clumsy, with a lot of nervous energy and some bad dyslexia. And even though he always seems to find himself in amazing places with amazing people, he doesn't come off like someone with a big ego. He is quick-witted and he's sharp and he carries a certain level of self-assurance. And though he can come off as bold and assertive, he claims it's a Bronx thing. He's not afraid to speak his mind or stand up for himself. I think this is why most people seem to really have a fondness for his energy and warmth. And I think most of all, his undying passion to learn not only about his craft, but also about people have really led to this incredible life and the writing of this incredible book. Peter Wolf, Waiting on the Moon, Artists, Poets, Drifters, Grifters, and Goddesses is 328 pages. And after all these years of waiting to read his story, Peter Wolf has written one for the ages. It's well worth the wait. I highly recommend this tremendous memoir. So does a book I've waited this long have any lingering questions? This is the part of the podcast where I like to ask what I call the one big question. And today I'm going to go deep and specific, deeper than I usually go, because this one is going out to all my J.Geils Band fans out there. I know my J.Geils Band fans are out there. I know who you are too. I'm talking to you. So like me, we were dying to know or read about all those years with that wonderful powerhouse band. So today's one big question: will J.Geils Band fans get their fix? Is this the definitive history of the Geils Band? Did you hear there is a new Bono book coming out and a documentary to accompany it? How about the new Cars book that just got announced? It's written by Bill Janovitz, the same guy who wrote the incredible Leon Russell book. If you haven't read that one, go get that one. Have you heard about the new Springsteen biopic? Well, you might have heard about some of these titles, but how do you stay on top of all the new rock and roll books and documentaries out there? Well, you can subscribe to the Rock Talk Studio Blast. The Blast is a newsletter. It comes out on the last Friday of the month, and I do my best, I promise, to give you everything I know about the world of rock and roll books and docs. So if you want to stay up and on top of that, you can get the monthly blast. The subscriptions right now are free. All you've got to do is send me an email and say, Big Rick, send me over that blast. info@rocktalkstudio.com is the email address. I'll put it in the show notes. You can look for that after listening to this episode. Send me an email. I'll send you the blast. All right, let's talk the J.Geils Band. The J.Geils Band came together in 1969, and they used their love and fondness for R&B, blues, soul, and rock and roll to create a band that not only paid tribute to that sound and those artists, but also made sure it presented to you that tribute in a way you would never forget. Possibly the greatest live band I ever saw. Those shows were put together as a party, or as they famously called them, house parties, that usually lasted over 3 hours, and when you left, you were drenched. And the leader of this steamrolling live sound was the lead singer, Peter Wolf. They were a people band, converting loyal followers on the East Coast and Detroit specifically. Anyone who saw them live was converted. And they struggled for a long time, for years. The record sales, they just struggled until finally breaking through with that Freeze Frame album and that huge hit single, Centerfold. When you say J.Geils, most people say, oh, Centerfold, yeah, I've heard of them. And if that's you, I strongly suggest you pick up their first album, because your mind will instantly be changed, because there really were two different bands. Their sound progressed over the years, and they got more modern and got that big hit with Centerfold. For those who know them for more than the Centerfold band, you have probably wanted to get the scoop about this amazing band in Wolf's memoir. You wanted to hear that definitive J.Geils Band story. I know I did. But I'm going to tell you right now, that's not what this is. There is a ton of mention of his time with the band in here. There's actually one full chapter on them. He titles it The Rise and Fall of a Full House. It's a sad one. He tells the story of their breakup that came right after they finally reached the mountaintop there with that number one hit. But this is not the J.Geils story from A to Z. But this is so good that you almost forget that you really wanted to hear that story. I'm still holding out for someone to come along and write the book. My brother keeps telling me it's me. I should write the J.Geils book, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. I would love to. You would have to clone me 3 times for me to be able to have the time to pull that off. And hun, if you're listening to this, if my wife's listening to this episode, because sometimes she does listen to the episodes, I promise you I'm not writing another book. But I do want to shout out to someone who did write a pretty cool J.Geils book, and that is his name is James Romag, and it's the On Track series. He wrote this book, J.Geils Band, Every Album, Every Song. Check this out. It goes through J.Geils Band's career. That's about as close as I've read to the definitive J.Geils story. So J.Geils fans, you need to pick up this memoir. It's a fantastic read about our man, the Woofa Goofa, Mama Tufa himself, the impeccable Peter Wolf. All right, before we wrap up today, I've got one more thing to tell you about, and that is next week's show. But before I jump into that, I do want to mention and just say thank you for bearing with me with this Peter Wolf book. This is one of the hardest podcasts I've done in 2 years. I've done about 59 episodes now, and I'm so hyped about this book. Didn't want to come across as like super fanboy. I wanted to give you the truth about this book, but I really loved it. I loved it a lot, and I hope it comes across in the review without being over the top. So thanks again for bearing with me as I talked about one of my favorite bands of all time, the J.Geils Band, and the amazing Peter Wolf. Next week's episode will feature a documentary about a rock and roll genius who formed one of rock's first interracial bands and encouraged us all to get up and dance to the music. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love talking rock and roll and being able to give you the scoop on a title I think is worth your time and money, like this highly recommended Peter Wolf book. Hey, stay tuned after this outro to hear from a cool podcast from my friends at Seeing Them Live. If you're into live concert memories, you're going to want to check these guys out. All right, folks, tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road. We'll see you next time in the Rock Talk studio.
I've always enjoyed talking with friends about the concerts we went to and remembering some of the crazy stories we brought back with us. Seeing Them Live is a podcast featuring live music fans retelling their favorite concert stories. When I was 11, I went to my first concert with my mom to see the Eagles. From that point forward, and into the next 4 decades, I'd see lots of bands, and every now and then, something beyond the typical concert experience would happen. Like when Mike Mills of R.E.M. asked if I would trade shirts with him after one of their concerts. Or when my friend's date decided she would rather hang out with Monster Magnet after the show than with us. Sometimes you get lucky and you're handed an Iron Maiden backstage pass just for the hell of it. And other times you're sitting at the bar with Rob Thomas just months before Matchbox 20 blows up. I love retelling these stories and sharing them with kindred spirits. Our musical tastes may differ, but the magic of live music is something all of us can relate to. Everyone has a concert story, and hopefully, one day, we'll hear yours.